There's a certain kind of loneliness that hits hardest when you're not alone. You're at a party, a family gathering, a team meeting, laughter all around, conversation flowing, music in the background, and yet inside, something feels hollow. You look engaged, even happy, but beneath the surface is a quiet disconnection, like your soul is knocking gently from the inside, waiting to be noticed. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who spent his life exploring the depths of the human psyche, believed this kind of loneliness wasn't about physical separation, it was about emotional exile. It's not that people aren't near you, it's that they can't truly see you. Because what needs to be seen, your fears, your dreams, your deepest questions, often lives in silence. Jung suggested that our loneliness is directly tied to our inability to communicate what really matters to us. And in a world obsessed with small talk, highlight reels, and constant distraction, it becomes harder and harder to speak from the soul. This is the paradox of modern life. The more connected we become on the outside, the more isolated we may feel on the inside. We scroll through updates, respond to notifications, and maintain the illusion of togetherness, all while drifting further from ourselves and from those who might understand us. Jung didn't see this as a flaw in the individual, but as a symptom of something much larger, a spiritual hunger for authenticity, for communion beyond words. This ache for connection is not something to be dismissed or medicated away. It's a message, a sacred discomfort, one that invites us not to escape into more noise, but to pause, to listen, and to turn inward. Because sometimes the deepest loneliness isn't a punishment, it's a passage, a quiet call to begin the journey home, to the place where your true self has been waiting, patiently, to be known. Solitude is a path to self-discovery. Solitude is often misunderstood. In a culture that idolizes constant connection, productivity, and performance, choosing to step away, to be alone, is frequently seen as strange, even suspicious. But for Carl Jung, solitude was not an escape from the world. It was a sacred return to the self. He believed that real transformation doesn't begin in the noise of the crowd, but in the silence of our own inner landscape. Solitude is not about shutting people out. It's about making space to let yourself in. In solitude, distractions fall away. The expectations of others fade. There's no one to impress, no mask to maintain. And in that quiet, something extraordinary begins to happen. We begin to hear the voice beneath all other voices, the voice of our own soul. At first, it may speak in whispers, old wounds asking to be healed, forgotten dreams begging to be remembered, truths we've avoided surfacing with clarity. It can be uncomfortable. Many run from it. But those who are brave enough to stay, who sit with themselves without flinching, begin a journey few ever take, the journey of self-discovery. Jung called this process individuation, the integration of our conscious mind with our unconscious depths, a merging of who we think we are with who we truly are. And for many, this process begins in solitude. It's where we meet the parts of ourselves we've hidden or rejected. It's where we confront our shadow and begin to reclaim our wholeness. Solitude becomes a mirror, not just to see ourselves, but to understand ourselves. In that understanding, we begin to change. We shed the false identities built on approval and fear. We become more grounded, more honest, more real. There's a quiet power in choosing solitude, not as isolation, but as devotion. A devotion to inner truth, a devotion to becoming. In a world that constantly pulls us outward, solitude calls us inward, toward depth, clarity, and authenticity. And it is there, in that inward turning, that we often find what we've been searching for all along. Not the person the world wants us to marry, but the person we were always meant to become. The nature of the self, conscious plus unconscious. Most people think of the self as the person they see in the mirror, the voice in their head, the choices they make, the roles they play in the world. But Carl Jung challenged this surface-level understanding. He believed that the self is far more expansive, far more mysterious. The true self, according to Jung, is not limited to our conscious awareness. It includes the vast and often hidden territory of the unconscious, the place where forgotten memories, suppressed emotions, ancestral patterns, and archetypal forces reside. To Jung, becoming whole meant bridging these two realms, the seen and the unseen, the known and the unknowable. The conscious mind is our everyday self, the part that navigates social roles, makes plans, solves problems. It's the face we show to the world. But beneath that surface lies the unconscious, a deep reservoir of instincts, dreams, fears, desires, and symbols that shape us in ways we can't fully explain. This is where our shadow lives, as well as our unexpressed creativity, our intuition, and the deeper truths we often avoid. Jung believed that to ignore the unconscious is to live half a life, a fragmented existence where we are out of touch with who we really are. Integration is the key, and that integration doesn't come from effort alone. It comes from awareness, from listening, from paying attention to our inner world through solitude, reflection, and dream work. The more we engage with what's hidden, the more we uncover the fullness of our being. We stop running from our darkness and begin learning from it. We stop clinging to our ego and start surrendering to something wiser within. In Jung's view, the self is not a fixed identity. It is a living process, a dynamic relationship between our inner depths and outer experiences. And only by bringing the unconscious into the light can we begin to walk through life with authenticity, clarity, and inner peace. To know the self is not simply to look outward, but to look inward, courageously and completely. The role of the shadow. Within every human being exists a side they often try to hide, not just from others, but from themselves. Carl Jung called this hidden aspect the shadow. It is made up of the parts of ourselves we deny, reject, or fear: anger, jealousy, insecurity, shame, selfishness, unspoken desires. These traits don't disappear just because we suppress them. Instead, they retreat into the unconscious, quietly influencing our thoughts, our behavior, and our relationships in ways we rarely recognize. Jung taught that the path to wholeness does not come from pretending we are only light. It comes from confronting the darkness within us. The shadow isn't evil. It's human. It's the mirror of all we've been told not to be. And the loner through solitude is often the one who dares to look into that mirror. In silence, away from distractions, the shadow begins to surface. It might show up in unexpected thoughts, in old emotional wounds, or in patterns we finally notice repeating. While most people run from this discomfort, Jung believed facing it is one of the most courageous acts of personal transformation. When we deny the shadow, it controls us. We project it onto others, see enemies where there are mirrors, and remain strangers to ourselves. But when we face it, when we name it, understand it, and integrate it, we reclaim our power. We become more honest, more compassionate, and more complete. As Jung famously said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Shadow work is not a one-time task. It's a lifelong unfolding, a commitment to radical self-honesty and inner reconciliation. It's not easy, but it's liberating, because in facing the parts of ourselves we fear, we also discover hidden strengths, creativity, resilience, and truth. The loner, by turning inward, steps into this sacred and often painful territory, not to be consumed by the darkness, but to finally become whole. Creativity and the power of solitude. Solitude is not just a place of quiet, it is a crucible of creation. In a world that moves too fast, filled with constant noise, endless scrolling, and external demands, we rarely give ourselves permission to be still. Yet in stillness, something extraordinary awakens. Carl Jung understood this intimately. He often retreated to his secluded stone tower in Bollingen, Switzerland, not to escape life, but to meet it more fully. There, surrounded by nature and silence, he carved symbols into stone and allowed his unconscious to speak. He believed that creativity didn't arise solely from the rational mind. It emerged from the depths, the dreams, images, and emotions buried beneath the surface of daily life. Solitude offers a doorway to that depth. When we step away from the chatter of the world, our minds begin to quiet. And in that quiet, ideas we didn't know we had begin to rise. Emotions we've ignored find their voice. We enter a space where imagination is free to roam without judgment. This is where art is born, where poetry is written, where music, insight, and invention find their roots. Many of history's greatest creatives understood this intuitively. Virginia Woolf needed a room of her own. Thoreau found truth in the woods. Einstein solved mysteries of the universe, not in meetings, but in moments of deep reflection. Solitude is not a retreat from inspiration. It is its home. But creativity in solitude doesn't always feel easy. It often arrives alongside discomfort, the fears, doubts, and shadow elements we usually suppress. Yet this tension is part of the process. As Jung believed, true creativity often requires engaging with the unconscious, with what lies beyond the edges of our conscious control. To be alone is not to be empty, it is to be open. And when we allow ourselves to be alone, not to escape life, but to connect more deeply with it, we open a channel to something timeless, something honest, something entirely our own. In solitude, we don't just find ourselves, we create ourselves. Emotional challenges of being a loner. While solitude can be a wellspring of insight, creativity, and personal growth, it often comes with a quieter cost, emotional isolation. For many who identify as loners, the external silence they seek is not always matched by inner peace. Instead, they encounter a different kind of ache, the feeling of being misunderstood, disconnected, or unseen, even when they're surrounded by others. Carl Jung recognized this deeply human experience. He argued that loneliness isn't simply the result of being physically alone. It arises from being unable to communicate what truly matters, what lives in the soul with another human being. For loners, the inner world is rich, layered, and alive, but expressing it can feel nearly impossible. How do you put into words the depth of your reflections, the insights found in solitude, the emotions born from silence? Often those around them, family, friends, even partners, don't speak that same internal language. The loner may try to connect, but the words fall short. They may long for deep, soulful conversation, while others seek light banter. This mismatch doesn't make the loner broken, it makes them different. And different can feel isolating. Jung believed this emotional distance was a key part of the individuation process, the journey of becoming your true self. The more deeply one explores the self, the harder it becomes to connect superficially. But this disconnection is not a life sentence. It is a phase of transformation, and it can be navigated. Jung offered hope. Even the most inward-facing souls could find communion, not by conforming, but by discovering or creating communities where authenticity is welcomed and depth is understood. The challenge, then, is not to abandon solitude, but to balance it, to find spaces, however rare, where the inner world can be shared, even in small, meaningful ways. The loner doesn't need many relationships, they need true ones. Jung reminded us that once we know ourselves, we can connect with others more honestly. The emotional struggles of the loner are real, but they are also the birth pains of authenticity. And if endured with courage, they don't just lead to isolation. They lead to profound inner clarity and to connections that finally feel real. The need for connection. Even for those who cherish solitude, connection is not optional, it's essential. Carl Jung never believed that the journey inward meant a permanent retreat from the world. He understood that no matter how deep one's inner life may be, we are still social beings, wired for meaning, communion, and shared experience. The loner's path often begins with withdrawal from noise, from false roles, from surface-level interaction, but it cannot end there. Because true psychological health, according to Jung, requires not just self-understanding, but also authentic connection with others. This presents a dilemma for the loner. How does one maintain their inner sanctuary while still opening up to others? How do you share the truth of your being with a world that often moves too fast to hear it? The answer, Jung believed, lies not in the blending in, but in connecting from a place of wholeness. When we know who we are, when we've made peace with our shadow, explored our depths, and cultivated an inner foundation, we no longer need to perform. We no longer need to chase approval. We can offer our presence, our ideas, our truth, gently, without force. The key is balance. Too much solitude can harden into isolation, a protective wall that eventually becomes a prison. But too much social noise can drown the voice of the soul. Jung taught that real connection comes only when we are connected to ourselves first. Otherwise, we show up wearing masks, disconnected, ungrounded, lost in performance. But when we relate from our authentic self, even a few deep relationships can be enough to sustain us. The loner doesn't need crowds, they need resonance. That's why finding or creating spaces where depth is welcomed is vital. Whether it's a single friend who understands, a creative community, or even a virtual circle where introspection is honored. These moments of resonance are rare, but they are sacred. In them, the loner is no longer an outsider, but a seer, a truth bearer, someone who has walked into their own darkness and returned with light. The need for connection doesn't negate the value of solitude, it completes it. Because even the most inward journey eventually seeks a witness, and even the loneliest voice still hopes to be heard. Jung knew we awaken alone, yes, but we become fully human in relationship. Finding balance between solitude and connection. The art of living as a loner isn't about choosing solitude over connection, it's about learning to hold both without losing yourself. Carl Jung believed that real psychological maturity involves finding the balance between the inner world and the outer one. And for many introverts, deep thinkers, and quiet souls, that balance can feel like walking a tightrope. Too much solitude and you risk isolation, a slow unraveling of your place in the human story. Too much connection and you drown in noise, losing the quiet truths that only emerge in silence. The loner's path is not about rejection, it is about integration. And integration requires discernment. Solitude is where the soul speaks. It is where ideas are born, where wounds begin to heal, where the unconscious stirs and whispers its truths. But solitude without connection can become a kind of exile, noble perhaps but lonely. Jung warned of this danger, that one could spend so much time in inner exploration that they become estranged from life itself. On the other hand, connection without solitude leads to fragmentation. Without space to think, reflect, and recharge, we become reactive instead of reflective, products of others' expectations instead of creators of our own path. The loner's task is to listen to both callings, the call inward and the call outward, and to trust when to answer each. Some days you'll need the forest, other days, the firelight of another soul. Neither is wrong, both are sacred. Jung's process of individuation, the becoming of one's true self, requires solitude for self-understanding and connection for self-expression. Without solitude, you cannot know yourself. Without connection, you cannot be known. To find this balance, one must create boundaries with intention. Protect your quiet time like it's oxygen. Choose your relationships not based on convenience, but resonance. Let silence be your teacher and conversation your offering. In doing so, you live not at the extremes, but at the center of your truth, whole, rooted, and real. Balance is not a final destination. It is a daily practice, a dance between depth and presence, introspection and engagement. For the loner, it's not about choosing one world over the other. It's about learning how to live fully in both and to move between them without abandoning who you are. Practical tools for embracing solitude. Solitude, when approached with intention, becomes more than just an absence of people. It becomes a sacred space for reflection, clarity, and transformation. But in a world built on distraction, many people don't know how to be alone with themselves. The silence feels heavy. The stillness feels foreign. And yet, Carl Jung believed that it is precisely in this space, undistracted, unfiltered, that the most important inner work begins. To embrace solitude fully, we need more than just physical isolation. We need tools that help us turn inward with purpose. One of the simplest yet most powerful practices is journaling. Writing down your thoughts, emotions, and observations can help you untangle the chaos of the mind and make unconscious patterns visible. Jung himself kept detailed journals of his dreams, symbols, and reflections, using them as a map to explore the depths of his psyche. In solitude, journaling becomes a form of dialogue with yourself, with your shadow, and with the deeper wisdom that often goes unheard in daily life. Mindfulness and meditation are also essential. These practices train you to observe your thoughts without judgment, to sit in silence without running from discomfort, and to reconnect with the present moment. Over time, mindfulness helps cultivate a stillness that is not empty, but full of insight, presence, and peace. Another important tool is creative expression. Solitude creates the space for new ideas to surface, whether through painting, music, writing, or even building something with your hands. Creation becomes a bridge between your inner world and the outer one. Finally, ritualizing solitude, setting aside intentional time alone, each day or week, helps shift your mindset. Solitude is no longer something that just happens when no one is around. It becomes a chosen and cherished part of your growth. These tools don't just help you survive solitude, they help you thrive within it. And in doing so, they awaken parts of yourself that only silence can reach. The journey of individuation. At the heart of Carl Jung's psychology lies one of the most profound and transformative ideas in all of modern thought: individuation. It is not simply a theory, it is a journey. A lifelong unfolding of who you are beneath the noise, beneath the roles, beneath the expectations that have been layered onto you since birth. Individuation is the process of becoming whole, not perfect, not polished, but real. It is the integration of opposites within us, the light and the shadow, the conscious and the unconscious, the person we show the world and the one we meet in silence. And for the loner, this journey often begins not in motion, but in stillness. To individuate is to step onto a path where few are willing to walk. It is a pilgrimage inward, marked by periods of solitude, deep introspection, emotional confrontation, and courageous self-honesty. Jung believed that this journey is essential to the human experience. Without it, we live split in two, reacting to life rather than participating in it with purpose and presence. We wear masks to fit in, follow scripts to avoid discomfort, and suppress anything that doesn't align with who we think we're supposed to be. But in solitude, the old narratives begin to unravel. We see ourselves more clearly, not just our strengths, but our fears, our contradictions, our wounds, and in seeing, we begin to heal. This healing isn't loud. It doesn't always look like progress. Sometimes it looks like sitting in silence, holding grief, or choosing authenticity over approval. But every honest moment with yourself brings you one step closer to your true center. Individuation is not isolation. It does not mean withdrawing forever. It means returning to the world whole, no longer seeking validation, but offering presence. No longer pretending, but living from a place of truth. It means creating a life that reflects the soul, not the crowd. And in that life, relationships become deeper, work becomes more meaningful, and your inner and outer worlds begin to align. Jung wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." The journey of individuation is this awakening, and though it often begins alone, it ends with a profound reconnection with life, with others, and most importantly, with yourself. Applying the wisdom of solitude to daily life. In a culture that often glorifies busyness, loud opinions, and constant connection, solitude can feel like rebellion. But as Carl Jung reminds us, it is often in the quietest moments that we hear the loudest truths. The journey inward isn't just for philosophers or mystics. It's for anyone who's ever asked, is there more to me than what I show the world? And the answer is yes. There is a deeper self waiting beneath the surface, one that longs not for perfection, but for authenticity. The key lesson is this: solitude is not loneliness when approached with intention. It is a tool, a mirror, a sanctuary, a compass. When you take time to be alone without distraction, you create space to feel your own emotions, hear your own thoughts, and explore what truly matters to you. You begin to notice patterns, desires, wounds, and creative sparks that were buried beneath the noise of everyday life. Start small. Carve out just 10 minutes a day without screens, without conversation, just you and your thoughts. Journal, meditate, walk without headphones. Observe what rises to the surface. It may be uncomfortable at first, but over time, this practice builds clarity, resilience, and self-trust. And when you begin to know yourself more deeply, you relate to others more honestly. You stop chasing shallow validation and begin forming connections built on truth. Jung's teachings invite us to become whole, not by denying our shadow, not by chasing ideals, but by embracing all parts of who we are. You don't need to be like everyone else. You just need to be fully you. And in that authenticity, life becomes richer, relationships deepen, and purpose becomes clearer. So if you've ever felt like the outsider, the quiet one, the misfit, maybe you're not lost. Maybe you're just beginning the most important journey of your life, the journey home to yourself.